Level 3. Defray. Taciturn. Terse.
Her presentation was persuasive and concise.
An effective letter to the editor must be succinct. Boon.
As your humble servant, I beseech you to grant me this boon.
This good weather is a boon.
His efforts were a boon to their enterprise.
Proletariat. Heterogeneous. Pittance.
Her inheritance was only a pittance.
He received a pittance for his services.
Some people will work for a pittance if the job is rewarding.
Glib. Penchant.
Career criminals have a proclivity for violence.
Successful business people have a propensity for discerning the bottom line and making a profit.
Many people have a penchant for chocolate.
Solicitous. Circumscribe. Circumscribe.
A limited vocabulary can circumscribe your career and undermine your chances for success.
She had to circumvent a lot of red tape to get the job done. Dearth. Ingratiating.
Every time Don walked by the boss's office or passed him in the hallway, he would flash a fake, ingratiating smile. That and other unctuous gestures soon made Don's coworkers loathe him.
Mercenary.
Harry's interest in the deal was strictly mercenary.
Extemporize.
She delivered her speech using notes, but during the question and answer session, she extemporized.
Erudite. Erudite.
He displayed his erudition with wit and grace.
Erudite professors often write erudite studies of obscure subjects.
Reading this book will help you build an erudite vocabulary, which in turn will help you become a more erudite person.
Austere. Laconic. Ameliorate. Expunge. Circumspect. Quiescent.
The sea was quiescent after the storm.
Foible.
A penchant for rich desserts is her only foible.
Fervent. Protract. Ostentatious. Quandary.
Larry looked at his smashed-up car lying in the ditch, then at his mistress, who was more smashed than his car, and he wondered how he had gotten himself into this predicament.
The soldiers who defended the Alamo faced a terrible dilemma: to surrender or die.
Julie was in a quandary over whether to look for a better job.
The thought of buying a new house put them in a quandary. They wanted a nicer place with more room for the kids, but could they afford it? Censure.
The Senate censured one of its members for unethical conduct.
Cavil.
A good editor corrects your grammar and punctuation, but doesn't nitpick every sentence.
A boss who niggles about every detail will eventually exasperate the employees.
Husbands and wives often carp at each other about household expenses and domestic chores.
Professors quibble with their colleagues about minor points of scholarship.
Newspaper critics will often cavil in their reviews just to assert their authority as critics.
Assimilate.
American society is composed of generations of immigrants, some more assimilated than others.
He feared that if he accepted the job, he would have to assimilate into the faceless machine of the bureaucracy. Rescind. Discernible.
The philosopher's goal is to discern the truth.
The doctor's job is to discern the cause of a disease.
The numismatist can discern the genuine from the counterfeit.
The psychologist and the detective both must show discernment in reading people's character and assessing their motives.
A wine taster must have a discerning palate.
The person with a discerning eye has an exceptional ability to make subtle judgments or distinctions.
The faint light of dawn was barely discernible on the horizon.
Industry analysts concluded that there was no discernible difference between the company's performance before and after the merger. Cataclysm.
The stock market crash of 1929 was a disaster for Wall Street, but it was only the beginning of the economic catastrophe we now call the Great Depression.
The death of a loved one is always painful, but there is no greater calamity than the death of a child.
The breakup of the former Soviet Union was the debacle of communism.
When Colosso Corporation laid off 20% of its workforce, company executives called it downsizing, but employees called it a debacle. Narcissism.
Amy was sick of dating narcissistic men whose only topic of conversation was me, me, me.
Incriminate. Stigma.
The media rarely have an indifferent view of celebrities and politicians. They either praise them or stigmatize them.
Brevity.
Forcefulness and brevity are the most important characteristics of a good speaker.
Perquisite. Indigent.
Many great writers have suffered through long periods of impecunious obscurity.
He is a lazy, impecunious wretch posing as a gentleman.
Ralph's addiction to booze and gambling eventually left his family destitute.
They built a new shelter for the homeless and the indigent.
Some people resent paying taxes to support the indigent members of society.
Clairvoyant. Adroit. Platitude.
Phil thought the management seminar was a big waste of time because the instructor kept repeating the same old platitudes he had heard many times before.
Fastidious.
City officials called for a scrupulous investigation into the alleged embezzlement of public funds.
All employees must follow company regulations scrupulously.
The report showed meticulous research.
Doctors must wash their hands meticulously before examining patients.
Albert dressed for the interview with meticulous care, all the while reminding himself that making a good first impression was the key to getting the job.
The new executive director seemed to have Robert's Rules of Order memorized, for she cited chapter and verse as she guided the board through each item on the agenda with a stern and punctilious hand. Vendetta.
The mayor accused her opponent of waging a vendetta instead of a campaign.
At first, Steve was excited about his new managerial position with an Eye for an Eye Incorporated, but he soon realized that the company was run by backstabbing executives engaged in vicious departmental vendettas. Lucid.
His 90-year-old mother is senile, but she still has some lucid days.
Salient. Categorical. Inscrutable.
Many of the workings of nature are inscrutable, even to biologists.
Human nature and the functions of the mind are still inscrutable to psychiatrists and neurologists.
Even to philosophers and theologians, the meaning of life is still, and probably always will be, inscrutable.
Construe.
Silence is often construed as agreement.
An ambiguous reply is difficult to construe.
Some men insist on construing that when a woman says no, she really means yes.
I'm not sure how to construe your question. Allude.
The Declaration of Independence refers to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as unalienable rights.
A political candidate might allude that an opponent has a skeleton in the closet.
In a report or proposal, you might allude to a study that supports your point without citing it directly.
Someone who is afraid of heights might allude to a disturbing childhood experience as the source of the phobia.
The novel contains many allusions to Shakespeare.
Only by allusion did the article suggest that the company was in financial trouble. Level 4. Provident.
After the birth of their first child, Sam and Sarah vowed to be provident and start putting aside some money every month for college and retirement.
Impute.
We usually ascribe good, but impute evil.
They imputed their fourth quarter losses to sagging sales and fluctuations in the stock market.
Some critics impute the decline in verbal skills among young people today to watching too much television.
Company officials vigorously denied the imputation of mismanagement. Astute. Neophyte. Enigma.
She is an enigma to me.
Their motives are still an enigma.
The case presents us with one enigma after another.
Credence.
In recent years, many medical studies have shown that reducing fat intake can help prevent heart disease, and there is now widespread credence among the public that a low-fat diet is more healthful.
Conservatism is his creed.
It is dangerous to give credence to gossip.
She gave no credence to their claims.
His neat appearance and confident manner lent credence to his story.
Venerate.
We revere great leaders, thinkers, and artists.
We venerate holy persons, sacred writings, and religious or moral principles. Garrulous. Trenchant. Autonomous. Panacea.
When novelist Toni Morrison won a Nobel Prize in 1993, she earned a place beside such esteemed writers as Ernest Hemingway, William Faulkner, and Mark Twain in the pantheon of American literature.
His lawyer emphasized that filing for bankruptcy would not be a panacea for his financial troubles. Ephemeral. Onerous. Laity. Pungent. Prosaic. Charlatan. Perfunctory. Morass.
There was always a morass of paperwork on his desk.
She penetrated the morass of red tape at City Hall.
Some people consider middle age the morass of life.
The project got bogged down in a morass of trivial details. Sophistry.
Voters today want candidates who address the issues, not ones who engage in mudslinging and sophistry.
Prolific. Mundane, mundane.
A mundane sex life can be compared to a TV dinner, but it's not a gourmet banquet.
Myriad,
On a clear night, you can see myriad stars twinkling in the sky.
a chief executive officer has myriad responsibilities. Dissident, laudable.
I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable, to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly.
Inimitable, jaded.
Their lovemaking left him jaded.
Seeing the consequences of so much violent crime had left the detective jaded. Myopic, demonstrable.
When Joe asked Sheila if she would have dinner with him, she took it as a sign of his demonstrable interest in her.
Callow, acquiesce.
The president of the company predicted that the stockholders would assent to the proposed merger.
Management is not likely to accede to the union's demands.
Despite her doubts about the plan, Lucy acquiesced.
Bob wasn't happy with the salary that mercenary media had offered him, but he knew he would have to either acquiesce or take an even lower-paying job.
One member of the jury remained obstinate and would not acquiesce in the verdict.
The chief executive officer acquiesced in the board of directors' decision. Pontificate,
Teenagers don't respond well when their parents or teachers pontificate.
deleterious.
Smoking is deleterious.
A divorce may be deleterious to children, injurious to their psychological well-being.
An impetuous statement may have deleterious consequences.
Ambivalent, pensive.
The most salient characteristic in the poetic temperament is pensiveness.
Impromptu, conjecture. Surreptitious,
A cat stalks its prey in a stealthy manner.
she heard the stealthy footsteps of a prowler outside the house.
Their furtive glances at each other during the meeting convinced Jim that there was something fishy about the deal.
Suzanne knew her date with Arnold was going to be a disaster when she caught him making a furtive attempt to look down the front of her dress.
For years, Paul was so surreptitious about his drinking that no one at work knew he had a problem.
The general decided to launch a surreptitious attack under cover of darkness.
Larry was afraid the IRS would find out about his surreptitious real estate deals.
Exemplary, impeccable.
Human beings are fallible creatures.
As your infallible guide through verbal advantage, I assure you that this program is an infallible method of building your vocabulary. Attest,
Many studies attest the deleterious effects of saturated fat and cholesterol.
Michelangelo's David is but one of many masterpieces that attest the greatness of this Renaissance artist. Copious, fallacious.
To the skeptical person, all statements, assumptions, and notions are fallacious until clearly proved otherwise.
Stoic, recrimination. Affinity, volatile, volatile.
The stock market is often volatile.
A person may have volatile moods.
The weather in New England is notoriously volatile.
Squalid, expedite.
The company decided to expand its workforce to expedite production of its new product.
Abject. Abject.